The meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 116 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083H, the committee is resuming its study of the impact of information and of misinformation on the work of parliamentarians. I'm going to remind everybody about the audio issues. Make sure that when you're not using your earphone, it's placed on the sticker that's on the desks. Please try to avoid hitting the microphones and try to avoid any feedback because it does cause damage to our interpreters. So I'm going to call on our witnesses today, and I would like to welcome first, as an individual, Mr. Ahmad Al-Rai, who is the director of the Disinformation Project at Simon Fraser University. We've also got Richard Frank, who is a professor in the School of Criminology, Simon Fraser University, and as well Mr. Peter Lowen, who is the director of the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. I want to welcome all three of you to our committee today on this important study. We are going to start with Mr. Al-Rai. You've got up to 5 minutes to address the committee, sir. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, dear honorable MPs and committee members, thank you for the invitation to address the committee and talk about the impact of disinformation on the work of parliamentarians. I will rely here on my previous academic research on the topic, and I think there are different internal and external challenges. First, and in connection to internal challenges, there is no doubt that Canadian politicians need to be continuously and factually informed about many national and international events and issues. And the belief and spread of disinformation could create a serious obstacle in understanding these events. The result could ultimately influence democracy in a negative way. It's important here to develop adequate verification skills and methods that largely rely on scientific consensus and collective intelligence about various issues. This is a fluid issue because such consensus could change with time depending on the emerging empirical evidence. And parliamentarians have to feel more comfortable navigating uncertainty. Of course, there needs to be thorough efforts to find factual pieces of information by examining different and alternative credible sources, assessing a variety of angles, and reading beyond the news reports themselves. This verification needs to be done even if the information comes from Canada's allies, such as the Five Eyes. And the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq is just one example of how disinformation about Iraq's alleged link to al-Qaeda or possession of weapons of mass destruction led to disastrous outcomes, not only to this country's infrastructure, but also to millions of people. More importantly, disinformation today has become a highly politicized and weaponized issue. For media literacy is not the magic key to counter it. This is due to the fact that some very much media literate political actors have themselves invested interest in spreading disinformation to serve their own political agenda. In addition, there are external challenges when it comes to disinformation targeting parliamentarians. In my research about foreign actors targeting Canada on social media, for example, I found ample evidence of many foreign states' disinformation campaigns, especially directed at Canadian politicians. For example, the Saudi actors were slightly more active and negative, followed by Russian, Iranian, and Chinese actors when it comes to targeting parliamentarians. As for the overall amount of disinformation targeting Canadians in general, the Russian actors were more interested in spreading disinformation, followed by Iran, China, and Saudi Arabia. Ideologically, Russian-affiliated actors continuously attacked Mr. Justin Trudeau and his Liberal Party, focusing specifically on MPs from Muslim backgrounds. These actors mostly align themselves with the far right in Canada, and in terms of attacking minorities, especially Muslims, and to a lesser degree, LGBT communities. As for Iranian actors, they focus their attacks on the Conservative Party, as well as Canadian MPs from Iranian origins who are critical of the regime. The Saudi and Chinese trolls also attacked Mr. Trudeau, mainly due to the presence and activities of some critical human rights activists in Canada. Other actors that are involved in spreading disinformation and often target Canadians in general include extremist groups and wealth elites, some of whom employ front groups and organizations to cause confusion about how we perceive reality. For example, the oil and gas as well as the vaping industries in Canada are active in doing so. The polarized public can also be part of these information activities. And in my research, I often saw that they target the intersectional identities of racialized Canadian politicians, especially from minority backgrounds. So to mitigate the problem with disinformation, I suggest creating a nonpartisan fact-checking initiative at the House of Commons, consisting of a variety of experts. The initiative needs to be to exclusively focus on fact-checking the evidence provided and making different claims, rather than assessing opinions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Mr. Al-Rawi. I also understand that you did share with the clerk some examples of what you deem as misinformation and misinformation. I'm just letting you know that that information has been sent to translation, and I expect that we could have it by the end of today's meeting, and I'll certainly share that information. Go ahead, sir. I see your hand up.
These are just like a few examples for the committee to have a look at.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. So they're in translation. Mr. Frank, we're going to go to you next for up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much for a chance to be involved in this. We've been doing lots of research on this, and I find this to be a very, very serious threat. Over the years, we've had information being used as a weapon to target well, whoever the opponent is, but we used to call it propaganda. Disinformation I perceive as digital propaganda, except it reaches us digitally through SMS, text, blog, Twitter, Facebook, etc. But very much unlike propaganda, where counter-propaganda has been deployed, right now I don't think we have any defenses or any equivalent counter-disinformation to essentially defend us. Up until very recently, disinformation was seen as just posts on social media, quite harmless, and any general user reading it would not see the coordinated effort behind disinformation or the specific intent behind it. And this makes it really, really difficult and tricky to identify. At least with propaganda, we saw the leaflets being dropped from the sky or messages being broadcast through megaphones, and we could recognize it as propaganda, or we would have an idea of what the source and the intent are. Whereas with online information, the source and the intent are quite often hidden, obfuscated. And it does have real-world consequences. The Trump election was shown to have Russian influence. The Brexit also had allegedly foreign influence. And these are humongously big, drastic changes. Russia did this. I'll pick on Russia for a bit, but Russia did this through troll farms, creating thousands of social media accounts that looked to be ordinary users, but these accounts supported radical political groups with specific political reasons. They fabricated articles, invented stories, posted nonsense, sometimes or quite often even posted the truth, but with a twist, aiming at vulnerable groups who then got riled up. These fake users can have many, many followers, and they will look established and real. But this was done in an organized fashion in a state-run campaign. The Internet Research Agency, as an example, has hundreds of employees. They had 12-hour shifts from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. These shifts overlapped with U.S. holidays, working hours, so they looked real. And with a budget of about 600,000 Canadian dollars a month, which might seem like a lot, but with that budget, they were able to achieve real impact abroad. And compared to a military intervention, $600,000 a month is negligible. And this information or any such content is designed to spread. And there was a study in 2016 that showed that this content does spread 6 times faster than real news. There's an old proverb saying, a lie is halfway around the world before the truth has got its boots on. And that's very much true here as well. Another study in 2019 showed that over 70 countries had such disinformation campaigns. Facebook was the #1 platform for this, and Canada is not immune to any of this. We've had election interference there was one MP in BC who lost an election specifically because of disinformation. We are under attack. Disinformation is promoting superiority of foreign countries, undermining confidence in our democracies, etc. We've done, it's now been 6 years since we started working on disinformation detection, specifically looking at training computer models to detect this type of content. And we've done about 4 or 5 projects specifically on this, most all funded by the Government of Canada. The end goal of this is to detect this disinformation campaign with artificial intelligence. Our models show that with about 90% accuracy, we can detect this content. So we know that this is doable. Back in January of 2022, we were asked by our project funders, the Canadian Armed Forces at that point, to study Russian online activity to see what their stance is with respect to Ukraine. We submitted our findings on February 13th, 11 days before the war started, essentially saying that Russia is painting itself as the victim and that it's taking steps to defend itself, that NATO, European Union, US, and other Western nations are aggressors against Russia. And 11 days later, they attacked Ukraine. But this plan to attack, not this specific plan, but the intent to attack was seen online beforehand.
Mr. Frank,
all of this content is hidden through a lot of innocuous information, soccer scores, TV shows, so it is hard to detect. And the solutions have to be community specific. The very exact same message can be safe in one community, but trigger another.
Okay, sir. I'm going to have to cut you off there. You're over 5 minutes. I'm sure members will have lots of questions to ask, and I really hate that part of my job because I really was enjoying what you were saying, but we have to stay on time. Mr. Lowen, you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you very much to the committee for this invitation to appear, and thank you to each and every one of you for the irreplaceable work that you do as members of Parliament. It is a real pleasure and it's an honor as well to be with you today to talk about the role of misinformation and disinformation in your work as members of Parliament. I know you'll hear from a large number of witnesses, so I hope that I can make a few helpful observations in addition to what's been said and what will be said. I come at this question, I'll just say, with 2 relevant sets of knowledge. I'm first and foremost a professor, and I have for several Canadian elections been conducting large-scale surveys to enable academic studies of how our democracy functions. And along with partners at McGill University, my lab at the U of T has been a leading collector of data on the media ecosystem, or the information ecosystem in Canada, which is that combination of what's being said and what's being believed and what exists in the media and in the minds of Canadians. We've also recently conducted a global study on attitudes towards artificial intelligence, which is relevant for the management of misinformation for platform governance. And then second, in addition to my academic work, I have worked as an expert witness for the Government of Canada in its unsuccessful attempts to defend changes to the Canada Elections Act that would prohibit the spreading of falsehoods about candidates' biographies. And you may recall that case was heard in 2020. So I'd like to draw from these 2 sets of experiences to make 5 brief points about the relationship between misinformation and disinformation and your work as members of Parliament. The first point is that misinformation has always been, and disinformation have always been, a part of our elections. For as long as we've been having elections, individuals and in groups have been spreading falsehoods about candidates, about parties, about what they believe, and about what they'll do in office. Second, we know very little about the actual effects of misinformation and disinformation, so it becomes very hard to make concrete empirical claims about it. But even if misinformation and disinformation have little potential effect, they still matter normatively to the quality of our elections. Third, and this is to that point, we need to separate the effects of disinformation on voters from its effect on the integrity of our elections. Elections are largely about giving voters reasons for their decisions. And if voters are voting based on misinformation, it is damaging, even if it doesn't change the way they would have voted absent that disinformation. So, for example, if a voter comes to the view that they're going to vote for the government for reasons that aren't true, that decision by the voter is arguably of less democratic quality than if they're voting for the government for reasons that are true. Likewise, a vote for any other party. Similarly, if MPs believe that they've won on the backs of misinformation, or if they believe that other MPs have won on the effects on the backs of misinformation and disinformation, especially that which may have come from foreign governments. And that can seriously erode not only trust in our democracy, but trust between MPs. And I presume, though I've never been inside of a caucus, can erode the functioning of caucuses. Fourth, Canada is perhaps uniquely poorly positioned to address the online spreading of misinformation and disinformation. It's quite clear that our legal regime makes it very difficult to prohibit the spreading of falsehoods during elections, absent an explicit demonstration of intent and a knowledge that information is false. And secondly, we don't have a sufficiently high amount of public trust to address platform regulation. Canadians, when you compare them to other citizens globally, don't view technology companies as partners in addressing these problems, and they are at the same time skeptical of government's capacity to regulate it as well. Fifth, and I say this with some sensitivity, but members of parliament and candidates to office can be sources of misinformation and disinformation. And it's important then to make sure that we have norms, practices, standards, which makes this unacceptable. Election candidates have incentives to spread misinformation and disinformation about their opponents and about the electoral process. And we have to look inside to ask what we can do to stop that as well. So if there were two takeaways from all of this, it's that we first need to understand the extent and the effects of misinformation and disinformation much more carefully, and that it is on Canadians and especially our political actors to take seriously the maintenance of the integrity of our elections. Thank you very much.
Okay, I want to thank all three of you for your opening statements. We're going to go to our 6-minute rounds and start with Mr. Barrett. Go ahead, sir.
My questions are for you, Mr. Lowen. In what ways does the communist dictatorship in Beijing use misinformation to influence the Chinese diaspora community here in Canada?
So thank you very much for the question. This is not an area in which I have precise expertise, but if I wanted to, so I'm not going to take long to say it, but the most effective way that this can happen, as I've seen it, is by inserting into the ecosystem ideas about what political candidates would do or what parties would do, and then allowing individuals who are interested in politics and like to talk about it to spread those ideas. So if you think about it as an infection and then a virus that spreads, that's I think an effective mental model for understanding how the CCP wants to influence voters' views during elections.
Based on that prescription, do you believe that the dictatorship in Beijing has been successful in their misinformation campaigns in Canada?
So this is a very difficult question, in my view, Mr. Barrett, to answer, and I appreciate your asking it, but I'll just say it quickly on two levels. Suppose that the Communist Party in China has spread misinformation about the positions of parties or voters in ways that are untrue and that are damaging, or perhaps they are true about positions, but they've spread those ideas and amplified them. That may have had the effect of changing voters' views and changing the views, particularly of Chinese Canadian voters. It's very hard empirically to say so. But even if it didn't, Mr. Barrett, the potentially equal effect is that we've spent all this time wondering if the integrity of our elections has been disrupted. And that is something that non-democratic regimes want us to do. They want us to wonder whether the integrity of our elections has been corrupted. And the only thing to do then is take very seriously that possibility.
Along with misinformation, we heard in testimony at this committee from the Chinese diaspora community that Beijing's campaign of influence and interference goes beyond disinformation, and it extends to threats targeting the well-being of members of that community, especially family members that might be in mainland China. Is that tactic something that's typical of foreign state actors to pair their online campaigns with real-world threats and targeting?
I don't have the expertise to comment on that.
Are you familiar with Justice Hoag's report, the interim report that was published?
I am.
So I have a couple quick questions with respect to that. On the 11th of April, the Prime Minister said that, quote, it wasn't simply an overall the election was free and fair, but that, quote, every single constituency election, the election integrity held, and it was free and fair, end quote. So Justice Hoag's conclusions indicated otherwise. She concluded that well-grounded suspicion about the PRC interference in, for example, Don Valley North, quote, could have impacted who was elected to Parliament. This is significant. Justice Hogue further concluded that in Steveston, Richmond East, she found that, quote, there are strong indications of PRC involvement, and there is a reasonable possibility that these narratives could have impacted the result in this riding, end quote. So we have an independent justice who has issued an interim report, pronounced on this issue, and we have the head of government, the Prime Minister, saying something different. What are we to take from that when we're looking at the upside for one individual, in this case the Prime Minister, to take an interpretation that we would say is far too generous, but it could be perceived as being misinformation?
So, Mr. Barrett, I read the Prime Minister's statement as definitive, and I read the statement of Justice Hogue as being one with uncertainty, where she's saying we don't know, but it's possible. And I'll tell you that as a person who's spent now the better part of 15 years as a practicing academic, studying elections very closely, trying to figure out why some ridings are won and some ridings are lost, Justice Hogue has the correct position. We cannot be sure that each and every riding in Canada in the 2021 election was not influenced by China, and for the Prime Minister to say that he's absolutely certain that Chinese influence had no effect is not a sustainable position.
So what does that say then to Canadians? Canadians who are members of certain diaspora communities, but to Canadians writ large, when the head of government is asserting something that there is no certainty about, as you inferred from Justice Hogue's interim report.
30-second response, Mr. Lowen.
Yeah, I think that's largely a political question. I don't mean that to dodge it, but what that says about the Prime Minister and his judgment is for Canadians to decide.
Yeah, I'd say with the remaining 15 seconds that it's a political decision and not one that's in the best interest of Canadians. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. Ms. Damoff, I have you next. Go ahead, please. 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all of your witnesses, or all of the witnesses, for being here today. I want to talk a little bit about the way that online disinformation gets turned into real world experiences for politicians, and in particular the role that politicians themselves play in that. I've decided not to run in the next election, largely because of the atmosphere that has developed here in Canada. And I recall when we were studying Bill C-21 at committee, the nonpartisan officials were receiving threats, and the chair repeatedly had to warn Conservative Party members about the tone that they were using with the witnesses. Back in March at this committee, I brought up that when Mr. Barrett and Conservatives bring up words like cover-up and corruption, it ends up leading to my inbox filling up with just horrible messages. And to that, I was called a pearl clutcher. And yet last week, when Mr. Chu was here and talked about his experience on social media, I think Mr. Currick called him a hero. It speaks to the obvious views that politicians hold of perhaps women in politics, but I can't count the number of times I've been called a pearl clutcher, and the new one is a cry bully from the gun lobby, which seems to have spread repeatedly. I just wonder, what responsibility do you think politicians have to ensure that they're not fanning the flames that lead to threats and real-world violence against politicians? And I'd like to hear from all three of you on this. Maybe Mr. Lowen, if you want to start.
I'm happy just to say two things very, very quickly, Madam Demuth. The first is that I was just, if I could say personally, I was sad to see that you have decided not to reoffer, and the reasons that you've given are I know very real and genuine and serious. I think we're arriving at a place where the disinhibition that social media allows for really allows people to come to views about politicians which are unfair and which are incorrect. This is not our House of Commons is not filled with people who are corrupt, looking for personal enrichment, who are set on selling out the country, and yet people in the public often hold that belief. So this kind of rising cynicism and a lack of trust in government is a very serious problem, and it's a serious problem that's going to hurt any party when it is in government. How you fix it is a whole other matter, and one on which I'd love to hear other people's views.
I'm going to go to Mr. Frank and then Mr. Al-Rawi, if that's okay.
I'm very sorry that this is the circumstance that has occurred and the reactions to it by others, including other MPs. It's not fair, but given the situation and the ability for social media to spread information and give rise to voices that are untrue and are malintended, foreign or domestic, I don't know what the solution is. This is, I think, just going to get worse and worse as our trust in government, in the MPs, is undermined. It could be foreign or it could be not, and that's one of the problems that we won't know unless we really dig into it and develop some defenses against this.
Mr. Al-Rawi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very sorry, MP, for your decision, and I understand this is a problem we are facing in Canada. In the research I have conducted with my team about the Canadian public interactions with Canadian politicians, we've seen a lot of these examples. Whatever happens in the Parliament will be directly echoed on social media and other sites. And unfortunately, some politicians use what we call edutainment. So they try to agitate the public with entertainment. So, and the result will be a lot of memes directed at a lot of politicians, unfortunately. The purpose is, of course, to belittle them with due respect and maybe make fun of them. But at the same time, it creates more divisions, unfortunately. So I believe that there is a need for a more civil discourse, especially that you are representing all of Canada and the Parliament. Like this is the case. Thank you.
How much time have I got, Chair? I forgot to set my timer.
45 seconds.
Okay, I didn't ask the question I appreciate the kind comments from all three witnesses. I wasn't trying to make this about me. I'm one example of many, and I'm actually saddened how many of my colleagues have come up to me since I did say this to share their own experiences in the public, and I do worry that we're dehumanizing politicians in a way that puts us all in danger. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Damoff. And on va à la prochaine intervention.
We're going to move to the next question for Monsieur Villemur. And just for the witnesses.
English interpretation here, if you don't understand French. Monsieur Villemur, vous avez 6 minutes. Commencez.
Mr. Villemur, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. I'll start with you, Mr. Frank, with a few questions. You mentioned that disinformation is digital propaganda, and I believe that we agree. Since Mr. Bernice, many things have happened. You also mentioned that we didn't know what the goal of propaganda was. But when we look at things, it seems that the goal of propaganda is to create chaos. Would you agree with that statement?
Not necessarily to create chaos, but to undermine the trust of the recipient in their higher authority. I'm reminded of the efforts by the U.S. government to drop leaflets onto army soldiers in Germany to what's the word I'm looking for? Disenfranchise them of the war and make them give up easier. not necessarily to create chaos, but there's a specific purpose to it.
Merci beaucoup. Puis vous avez parlé également de...
You also talked about the goal of propaganda, and with disinformation, we can't quite see the goal, and so it's difficult to defend ourselves against it. What would you suggest to defend ourselves with the information that you have at this time?
Excellent question, and I think that's the goal for the next couple of years, to figure this out in a lot of detail. But we need to recognize that this is happening and develop counter narratives against it. This is an information-based war. We have an aggressor. We need to defend ourselves against it. The attack is information-based. The defense should be information-based. So when I say we, I mean Canadians need to go into these communities and identify this content and counter it. If there is an effort to say attack an MP, we need people to come to their defense and say this is not true, this is not how it is, and de-escalate the situation.
À un moment où, autrefois, avec la propagande, on avait un récit.
Before, there used to be a narrative with propaganda, and we could have a counter-narrative. But for the past few years, we've noticed that there's more of a clash. And so often there are quick slogans with no meaning that replace policies. And what can we do to face that? Because this clash does not build trust with the population.
I recognize that there are communities that actively look for conspiracy theories, distrust government, and those people are going to be really, really difficult to reach. But for most people, I would say that's not the case. They are reachable, and if we develop similar, very simplistic slogans, campaigns, I think we can reach them and again counter that narrative that they are under attack with.
Est-ce que vous iriez jusqu'à dire que la désinformation...
Would you say that disinformation is a means of cognitive war, of waging cognitive war?
Yes, it's a war of ideas. Yes.
D'accord. Monsieur?
Thank you. Mr. Lowen, do you believe that it's possible that certain political parties are using disinformation for political gain in Canada?
Sorry, sir, you're on mute.
Pardon me. I think it's a story as old as time that politicians, even in Canada, have said things about their opponents and what they will do in office and what the consequences of their being in office will be, which they either know to be untrue or could not know to be true.
Tout à fait en accord avec vous, mais...
I agree with you, but do you believe that with modern communication means things can be amplified and so harm has more impact than before?
So that is possible. I mean, the other serious related threat is that we don't know what's being said. So with the way communication happens now, which is often over apps and over other uses where we can't keep track of what's being said, we have less of a window into what's being said, and there is, related to this, less of an accountability mechanism, and that we have less journalism than we had in the past. We particularly have less local journalism, which is following what local candidates are saying. So our capacity to sort of see the whole conversation that's going on during elections and to see how much mistruth there is more limited than it has been in the past. So even if politicians are no less dishonest today, or even if the spread of misinformation, the share of it is the same, our capacity to see it is arguably lower than it was before.
En quelques secondes, dites-moi, la commissaire Hogg a dit il y a...
Commissioner Hogg stated that there was foreign interference during the previous election. This interference didn't have an impact on who won, but there was an impact in certain ridings. Do you believe that this interference that worked but didn't work should be concerning for parliamentarians?
Deeply so. It should be deeply so. No parliamentarian should have to wonder whether one of their colleagues was elected with the support of a foreign government.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay, merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lowen.
You at the end of the table, way back there. You have 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to spend the bulk of my time centering in on trying to get the best recommendations that we can from the witnesses here. So I'm going to be putting some questions to the witnesses. I would ask that you would try to answer in a succinct way to allow for other witnesses to opine as well. So if I ask it in a rapid-fire way, it's not me being curt, it's just me being judicious with my time. I want to begin with you, Mr. Elrauer. You had mentioned or proposed a nonpartisan fact-checking commission or body that might be able to separate out facts rather than opinions when it comes to misinformation and disinformation by MPs. Is that correct? And so
That's correct.
And so we heard in subsequent testimony that there is the ability through both Mr. Lowen's media ecosystem, which collects data, and Mr. Frank's, I believe, has some work around the dark crawler and the dark web. Could you see this being taken up in an effective way by AI tools? Or is this something that you would see simply as being professional people, subject matter experts in a human context trying to keep up with the scale of all the misinformation, disinformation?
Thank you very much for the question. From my somehow limited experience working with AI tools, even the new ones, I can be certain to say that we haven't reached that stage yet. We still need humans to qualitatively assess pieces of information. There are, of course, cues that could be easily detected with other AI tools. For example, if an image is created by AI technology, like we call them deepfakes, or a video being deepfake, but there must be some kind of qualitative assessment done by humans. Thank you.
And just to round it up for you, sir, do you have other recommendations, legislation? I want you, if I were to be AI, I'll prompt you to say, pretend you're an MP, give us the best recommendations that you could to help counter some of the gaps and some of the threats that you've identified.
I think this is a collective effort. I mean, I don't want to say that parliamentarians should do all the work alone. Everyone should be involved. Like, I know that some NGOs were invited to this committee. I think they should also be involved in this work. So we need to fact check each other, actually, including myself.
I'll re-ask the question. I'll re-prompt you. We're here as member of parliament. At the end of this committee, we're going to be studying the testimony. The testimony will be comprised of not just what's wrong. We've spent a lot of time talking about what's wrong, probably still only scraping the surface. What we have to get from the testimony are recommendations. So understanding what our powers are, what our mandate is as a committee, what would you recommend to us that we adopt in our final report to help offset, certainly not to solve, I'm not talking silver bullet, but offset some of the challenges that you've outlined? And then I'll put that question to the two other witnesses.
I think I'm not sure what to say here, but I believe that the fact-checking initiative could be very useful because, yes.
See, I will take back my time, and I will go on to Mr. Frank. I do appreciate somebody who says they don't have the answer. I have to say that all the time. Mr. Frank, what is it from your perspective that you would recommend to us for the consideration in a final report on this topic?
I've lots to say, but a lot more than the amount of time here. But a couple of main points. This has to be done with the help of AI. What we're seeing right now is just a preview. This is going to get significantly worse as the disinformation is going to be AI generated. So the use of AI eventually will have to be done to detect this content, to de-escalate it, and to intervene. During our studies, we've always employed humans, domain experts, people of specific communities that we wanted to detect disinformation in. So the approach that we've done, I think we successfully used, was to get members of the community to point out examples of disinformation topics, and then use that to build a or start to train an AI model, which then can pick up on this and continue detecting news sources.
With that model, given that I'm to understand, and you can just say yes or no, is this the dark crawler model that you put into the dark web?
It's within that context.
So
yes.
given the vastness of that, could an application not be set upon us as the 343 seats that will happen in the next election, including political parties? It seems like a very smaller digital ecosystem than the dark web.
It has to be done within each community. If it is the members of parliament, that would be one community. So we would need experts who know what's going on, who would be able to start pointing.
We got 30 seconds left. Professor Lowen, if you could pontificate on recommendations.
You're on mute again, Mr. Lowen. Sorry.
No, my apologies. I would say, Mr. Green, that we've decided in our country through a lot of legal wrangling that we do allow the limiting of speech during elections. We limit it to politicians largely and to parties, and we limit how much third parties can speak. So that opens a legislative door for you to decide on what the arena will look like during elections. The challenge is that generating speech through AI is virtually costless, and it can be done by people who are not people. So the legislative framework that tries to limit which people can speak and limits how much they can speak through money is not fit for purpose for the world that Mr. Frank in particular is describing. So you need to find a way legislatively to try to maintain, I think, the equilibrium that we have now in this new environment.
Mr. Lowen, I will be coming back to you in my second round, so
Thank you.
I look forward to more insight on that.
Thank you, Mr. Green. That concludes our first 6-minute round. We're going to now move to 5-minute interventions. Mr. Brock, followed by Mr. Baines, 2.5 for Mr. Villemure, and 2.5 for Mr. Green. Mr. Brock, 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your attendance today. This is interesting information. Before I get into my questions, Mr. Frank in particular, I noted that you ran out of time during your opening remarks. I'm willing to give you as much time as necessary. Do you think you could wrap things up in under a minute?
Thank you. I was going to suggest a couple of positives of what we should be doing. And I do appreciate the time. My first suggestion would be to establish trust in journalistic sources or somehow help establish trust. I think we're losing it. A lot of people are getting their news on social media. We need to pull them back into trusted sources. Once we do that, I think the people will be more robust against disinformation, but that needs proper funding. At the same time, the government can't be seen as the arbitrator of truth, so this has to be positioned carefully. Educational campaigns, I've developed courses in my own for these campaigns. We just need to make people question more what they're seeing to make sure it is real. The government is pledged a lot of money for research. That's excellent. We need that. And I think we need to bring in AI into the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm going to stick with you, Mr. Frank, because I know my colleague, Mr. Barrett, sought remarks from Mr. Lowen with respect to his perceptions of Justice Hogue's interim report on foreign interference. I think all three of you would agree that the misinformation, disinformation campaign that has been happening for several years now, at least throughout the 2019-2021 election and currently in this country, has substantially impacted Canadians' confidence in our democratic institutions. And that is something that we all as parliamentarians have to work on. But I want to quote a couple of paragraphs from Justice Hogue's report, and Mr. Frank, I'd like to get your commentary on it. In your opening remarks, you spoke specifically about the candidate, Kenny Chiu, and the impact of the disinformation, misinformation campaign, not only from communist China, but as well as the Liberal candidate who ultimately won the election and his participation in the process. I believe you also made reference to the fact that you were aware of Kenny Chiu's testimony at this committee. Was that correct?
I know some of it, yes.
Yes. So I'm going to quote a couple of paragraphs. She says, in the case of former Conservative MP Kenny Chiu, the commissioner identifies that there were strong indicators of Beijing's interference campaign, that there was a reasonable possibility that this resulted in the defeat of Mr. Chiu and the election of his Liberal opponent. It is also clear that as Canadians judge the actions of the Trudeau government and its failure to prevent this interference, that we must consider Commissioner Hogue's conclusion that the interference that was allowed to occur undermined public confidence in our elections. She notes that the risk of foreign interference in our elections will increase as long as the Liberal government fails to take sufficient protective measures to guard against it. Your comments, Mr. Frank.
I'm not a politician. I'm a Canadian. I'm happy if any government is able to implement a solution to this. But our trust is being attacked. Our trust in the election process is being attacked. We need to somehow fix this.
During the Prime Minister's appearance at the inquiry on foreign interference, he voiced frustration over intelligence leaks to the media, which he felt were sensationalized and taken out of context. He claimed that his government had implemented robust mechanisms, his words, robust mechanisms to detect and combat interference, but was portrayed as negligent in the media. Do you believe this critique was justified, and do you think the government's efforts are sufficient? I'll put that to you, Mr. Frank, and I'd like to put the same question to the other two participants.
30 seconds to do that.
Given that there were leaks, whatever measures were put in place obviously weren't enough. I'm not privy of the details of what were implemented, but I trust that they did the best they could.
Mr. Lord?
I think there's an inherent challenge, Mr. Brock, in that we are setting up a mechanism. There's a mechanism set up for very good public servants to have a finger on the alarm bell, so to speak. But the politicians to whom they report have conflicts of interest. In the heat of an election, it's very hard for a prime minister or for a party leader to say, I want to tell everyone that my candidate has benefited from foreign interference. And I think fixing that conflict of interest is a serious concern.
Thank you. Perhaps you can get to Mr. Al-Rawi in the next round, Mr. Brock. Mr. Baines, 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our guests for joining us today. I'm going to go first to Mr. Frank on the defense piece. If you can sort of elaborate a little bit more. You talked about no defense. You talked about introducing AI. How would that work? What kind of a framework would be put in place? And if you can talk about your tool and how that could help in some way.
So the world I foresee in the next couple of years is whatever disinformation content we've seen so far would become AI generated and would escalate by a factor of 10 or 100. So the solution I foresee is something similar, using humans, domain experts in whatever community would start to identify disinformation attacks. And from that, within that one specific community, AI could be trained to detect future such content. That's the research and that's the model that we've been working with through different grants and funding opportunities. I think this solution will help us detect, model. We were able to create charts saying this person is very heavily linked to another. This information is coming from this person, but these people are also linked. And that helps us figure out where this information is coming from, for example.
And are you able to detect like what region this information is coming from? Can you get as so far as that?
We can infer the actor behind it, the government, based on the messaging. But sometimes Canadians themselves will be either tricked or paid to disseminate messages. An idea takes place in a conspiracy community, and they start parroting the same message, which is disinformation.
Like as candidates, we're all subjected to misinformation, disinformation, whether it's flyers, candidates putting out door to door, and trying to influence in that manner. Like, what about domestically? How do you see misinformation, disinformation? Is it on the rise domestically here?
We know of some groups that do spread disinformation domestically. They are very likely linked to foreign actors, though.
Who is that?
I can look it up for you. I don't have names handy.
Maybe I'll go to Mr. Lowen as well, just to sort of. I know you talked a little bit about AI maybe not being the best. What sort of alternative means do you think that are appropriate?
No, so it depends on what problem we're trying to solve, Mr. Baines. So, AI and high-dimensional data tools are going to be very, very useful for figuring out the ecosystem and understanding how much misinformation and disinformation is spreading, right? But I think we have to recognize that at the core of this are human beings who want to spread this information. So when people hear something that is salacious and perhaps untrue, but also very damaging to their political opponents or politicians they don't like if they're citizens, they have incentives to spread it, right? So the problem here is we overweight the degree to which this problem is foreign. This problem is as domestic as it is foreign, in that the technologies we have allow people to spread lies in ways that are hard to detect but are easy to spread. And that old analogy that Mr. Frank alluded to is correct, right? Before we can catch up with these lies, they've made their way halfway around the world.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much information out there. I'm wondering, like, we heard from an expert, Ben Nemo. He's a threat investigator. He talked about how certain Russian campaigns were extremely effective, but there was another one that had put out hundreds of thousands of messages but didn't really make an impact. How can we detect how messages are being received and what the impact is happening in terms of how they're being received?
So I'd say that there are methods for doing this, and academics have spent a long time thinking about how you measure the effects of information on things. And I wish I could tell you that it's easy to say definitively whether a message has worked or not. But to Justice Hoag's point in her report, it's hard to know precisely what effect a message has had because we're not running large-scale controlled experiments. All of these campaigns and these instances of misinformation are happening in the context of very, very noisy campaigns. So in some ways, I think the way to think about this is not to think about effects, but to think about how much you can inoculate your system from it. Because even if you're concerned about foreign interference, even if it had no effect, it's still a bad thing if Beijing thinks they had an effect, right? And it's a bad thing if MPs think that foreign actors had an effect. So, what effect it actually had, and Mr. Chu, it's hard to know precisely what happened, but there's reason to believe something bad happened. That reason is enough to try to inoculate ourselves against foreign interference as much as possible. So it's not kind of, there was no effect, no problem, right?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Baines. Monsieur Villemure pour 2 minutes et demie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start with Mr. Lowen. We often say that the decrease of local journalism has an impact on disinformation. Many witnesses have said that we need education to counter disinformation. But when a large part of the population gets its information from TikTok, how can we educate them? What can we do as parliamentarians to ensure this proper education?
So part of what you're identifying is a huge credibility problem, which is that we don't know who's an expert anymore and we don't know who's credible anymore. And I would just say very, very respectfully that members of parliament don't help themselves in this process because voters have come largely to the conclusion that they cannot believe what members of parliament say. So I think that one way of starting to reestablish that credibility is to be very clear about why you disagree with your opponents, but to very, very explicitly shy away from the spreading of rumors or falsehoods or the suggestion of falsehoods and bad intention about reporters, and spend some time over the next couple of elections trying to elevate the way that politicians engage in discourse, and that might give politicians a bit more credibility against a plethora of sources that are trying to really trying to really claim that they have equal amounts of credibility or authority as politicians and other experts.
Oui, Monsieur Frank, allez-y.
Mr. Frank, go ahead.
Just very quickly, aside from educating students in school, part of the disinformation campaigns that I've alluded to would imply going into TikTok and other sources where people are getting disinformation from, and specifically countering it somehow through the same style of messaging, same style of videos, etc.
D'accord.
All right. I forgot what I was going to ask, but that's fine with me. That's enough, Mr. Chair.
For 2.5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Professor Lowen, I'm going back to you on recommendations to this committee on the mandate of this topic. Do you have additional recommendations that we should be considering?
I think you should consider whether you want to vigorously restrict the spreading of known falsehoods during elections. I don't have an opinion on that per se, but I know that
why no opinion, sir? Why no opinion?
Well, because it's kind of a political question in some sense, Mr. Green, in that question does balance out the rights of free speech against other considerations, and where you strike that balance is a political question.
I would put this back to you. Given your subject matter expertise, do you believe that there is a reasonable limitation that would outweigh the reasonable limitation of expression that would outweigh the potential harms that you've identified in your work?
Yeah, I think it's worth exploring whether political candidates should be banned from spreading falsehoods about candidates' biographies, other candidates' biographies. Yes.
Mr. Frank, do you share that assertion, or do you have a different one?
No. I'm still collecting my thoughts. I apologize.
Okay, Mr. El-Rawi, do you think that there should be a prohibition of propagating falsehoods during elections by politicians and political parties?
I don't think that's possible. I mean, I agree with Professor Lowen on this. It might infringe on freedom of expression. You are free to say whatever you want. But of course, there should be some kind of repercussions if you are saying some lies. What I suggest to address your question is that there needs to be more transparency from the MPs about what they are claiming to say. And also, yes.
I'm going to end there. I would say with my 30 seconds left for your consideration, for the good and welfare of the committee, as subject matter experts, we're calling on you to help us contemplate these issues. You will have a week, likely, when this is done, to reflect on what's just been said and the testimony that you've provided. I would share with you that we have codes of conduct. I would share with you that if a minister came to this committee and lied, we would have the ability to provide accountability in that regard, to safeguard the information that we have in order to make informed decisions. So I'm going to put this on the table to you in a very clear and candid way. I need for you to consider this question with seriousness, and I'm going to request that you consider submitting back to this committee in writing recommendations explicitly stating what you would do in this situation. Otherwise, we're just identifying what we already know to be true. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green, and we'll take that as a formal request of Mr. Green to our witnesses to submit some solutions to this. I like putting timelines on it, so if we can if you do feel the need and want to respond to Mr. Green's request to submit in writing to the clerk a week from today at 5 o'clock, if you don't mind, gentlemen, I would appreciate that. We're going to go to 2 5-minute rounds. I have a question for Mr. Frank that I am going to ask at the end of these interventions. But Mr. Couric, go ahead for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Chair, and appreciate the conversation that we've been able to have here today, and dealing with what are big issues. And, you know, I just a reflection before I jump into a few specific questions. You know, I find it a shame sometimes that we don't have newspapers anymore, because at least when somebody would open a newspaper, you'd be confronted with, you know, columns you might agree with, columns you disagree with, and everything in between. And I think sometimes that need for critical thought and evaluation is lost in political discourse. Just as as an observation from somebody who's passionate about not just politics, but the political process and what that means to our democracy. Mr. Lowen, you said that there's challenges. Your wording, I believe, was poorly positioned to respond to some of these things. And quite often, when we are talking about dealing with misinformation, disinformation, balancing the need to protect freedom of expression, especially because I don't think anybody around this committee would want to limit free and open political discourse. So you use the term poorly positioned. Can you maybe expand on that just to explain exactly what you meant and how we strike that right balance to ensure we're not limiting political discourse, but at the same time encouraging honest and thoughtful debates?
Thank you for the question, and I appreciate the chance to clarify. I would say three things very rapidly. One is that when I look at the opinions of Canadians versus people in other countries, there's just less sort of political room in terms of support from Canadians for government to regulate the online space or to try to regulate it, but there's also less trust that Canadians have in other actors to regulate, whether it's the tech companies or whether it's civil society groups to take part in that regulation. So it's like we're in a little bit of muck here, trying to figure out if we want to regulate online platforms, how we're going to do it, Mr. Kirk. That's the first point. The second one is that it took us a long time to get to the place where we are in terms of campaign finance, where we limit donations pretty severely, where we limit spending, and where we try to constrain debate and elections largely to parties and candidates. But I think most MPs would agree that kind of works in that it allows for a focused conversation during elections, if you will, right? And we have legal precedent to do that. But that model is not going to work in a world in which a lot of speech can be generated by non-humans and be generated very, very cheaply, because the two mechanisms you use, who can speak and how much can they speak via money, don't apply in the online space. So I think that's a difficult position. And then I think that just candidly, this is a political comment which I'm a bit reluctant to make, but why not? I'll make it. I think that it's difficult to deal with these issues when not the legitimacy of an election, because our election was legitimate, but the question about why the last one or two elections turned out the way they did is itself contested by the subject matter. It makes it hard for all of you as parliamentarians to sort through this.
I appreciate that. And one final question, if I could, to Mr. Lowen and Mr. Frank. Hopefully there's time here. We saw two examples, and of course everything is political around here. One, Justice Hogue's report, and we've talked a lot about that. But also the Deputy Prime Minister posted a video that ended up being flagged on Twitter as being edited. It was a montage, basically, taking, it was former Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole, a few different things he had said over the course of what was a more extensive conversation about healthcare, and it was posted as if it was to say something that certainly was not what was intended, and certainly not what was said in the context of the larger sentence. So if I could ask just quickly, how do we make this balance? Because I hear often somebody say that when they disagree with you, oh, well, that's misinformation, disinformation, or hatred. Yet, when it comes to their opinions, if you oppose that, it becomes, this whole conversation gets uber torqued and emphasized to the 10th degree. So how do we make sure that we bring it down to say, okay, actually, how do we deal with the facts? If I could, 15 seconds, maybe both of you.
I would say very quickly, Mr. Kirk, that I think that example is a good one about the system working in some sense. Politicians frequently torque what their opponents have said, right? And they'll take little turns of phrase. But in that case, the Deputy Prime Minister was sort of caught out in a sense, right, for having put out a video that I think unfairly probably pieced those words together, and she had to spend some time explaining that. So in some sense, that I think is kind of how you want the system to work, right? If you're going to not truly represent what your opponent said or stands for, and you get caught up for it, then you have to explain why you did it.
Thank you, Mr. Lowen. I'm sorry, Mr. Kirk, but we got to move on because I'm allowing a little extra time here because this is an interesting conversation. Mr. Fisher and then Ms. Khalid, I understand you're going to be splitting your time.
Yes.
I'll give you a 2.5-minute warning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. Appreciate all our witnesses for being here, our subject matter experts. I only have probably time for one question, but I just want to say, Mr. Frank, you commented misinformation is designed to spread and how. I mean, we're seeing that every single day. And Mr. Al-Rawi, I love the idea of this nonpartisan initiative you have. I seem to recall back in the day, 2017 maybe, we had a thing called the baloney meter. As unscientific as that might have been, it was a really great nonpartisan explanation of what politicians said and whether it was partially full of baloney or completely full of baloney. I tell you, I missed the baloney meter. And you got the word of the day, Mr. Al-Rawi, is agitainment. It's just all these little things going off in your head when you use that term. But my question is going to be to Mr. Lowen, and you are a subject matter expertise on partisanship. I wonder if you could just comment on the current climate of partisanship in Canada. In Canada, it seems to be mostly focused through social media, but maybe compare it to, and I was in the United States, I was in Washington a couple of years ago during midterms, and I got a chance to see what they have on their TV advertising during midterms, and I will tell you, I hope and pray that we never, ever, ever get there. I see us sliding very quickly towards that example, but if you could just maybe talk a little bit about partisanship in Canada and maybe compare it with what we see in the U.S., and if you could be somewhat brief so that we can share time with MP Khalid.
Yeah, I would just refer you to work by my colleague Eric Merkley at the University of Toronto, who studies affective polarization, that is polarization, how people feel about each other. And while we don't have issue polarization in Canada, we still largely agree on most stuff, actually, when you get down to it. We are seeing increasing degrees of affective polarization, which means that people have bad feelings about other people because of what their political views are. And to me, that's not a very good outcome for a society.
Khalid.
Thank you very much. Now, I really appreciate the testimony today. We heard today that disinformation propaganda has always existed, and we realized that social media has given actors the ability to spread their messages at lightning speed, and it gets harder and harder to kind of bring those messages back. And I'll share with you kind of what the implications of that for myself has been. In 2017, I became the victim of a disinformation campaign amongst the Conservatives in their leadership campaign, where they were sending out fundraising emails asking, give us $5 and we'll stop MP Iqra Khalid from bringing Sharia law into Canada. And that spiraled into a massive social media campaign against myself, to the point where I had police patrolling my residence because somebody had released my address, encouraging people to kill me. I had right-wing extremists hanging out at my constituency office, terrorizing my community staff. And 90,000 emails in my inbox, et cetera. And it took a very, very long time. And I still, to this day, deal with a lot of the consequences of that fundraising campaign that the Conservative leadership in 2017 had led to. And so I really am curious to know, where does the responsibility lie here? Was it the Conservative candidates raising money off of my personal safety and security by spreading disinformation? Was it social media platforms who allowed this to happen without removing it, without fact-checking? Or is it media in general who are not playing the role of the watchdog that they perhaps used to in the past? And I'll start with Professor Lowen and then go on to Mr. Al-Rawi. Thank you.
Got a minute.
I'll just say that's a very hard question to answer, Madam Khalid, about who is responsible for spreading a lie and for the downward effects of it, downstream effects of it. That doesn't mean it's not serious, but I think it's probably a responsibility that's shared among people all the way down that chain. But if politicians are spreading active falsehoods about other people, they have some responsibility for what people do with that information politically.
Mr. Al-Rawi?
Thank you, MP. I'm very sorry to hear about this. I actually wrote 2 research studies, peer-reviewed, mentioning you. I believe that social media is to blame, partly, but also people's ideological beliefs that would, prompt them to do so. Unfortunately, this is the case. There is a lot of polarization happening, and some political parties use what I call disruptive identity politics. So they work on that issue in order to, again, mobilize some segment segments of the communities, I think, to probably win votes or create tighter communities, unfortunately.
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Before I let you go, I do have a question. I'm gonna pose this question to all three of you, but I'm gonna direct it first at Mr. Frank. And it dealt with your comment earlier in your testimony about trusted sources, credible sources of news being lost. There was a time, Mr. Frank, and all of you know, that trusted news sources, whether it was anchor people or news people, were the go-to places for trusted sources. And now with social media, the difficulty is finding those trusted sources. And it's even more difficult now because of, there's a standoff that's going on right now, and I'm sure you're all aware, between Facebook and the government as it relates to Bill C-18. Facebook has made the decision, and Facebook for many Canadians is a source of information, but Facebook has made the decision that they're not going to allow the sharing of links on its platform from issues or from dailies like the Globe and Mail and others. And paywall notwithstanding, I'm interested in hearing how, from each of you, how this situation is playing out to allow further disinformation or misinformation, I call it lies, to be propagated on social media without access to these credible sources of information that are clearly fact-checked, that are clearly vetted through legal departments, all of this information. If that information is not available on Facebook, how much of an impact does that have on people's abilities to get the right information on social media? And I'll start with you, Mr. Frank, and then I will work around to Mr. Lowen and Mr. Al-Rawi. Mr. Frank?
Yeah, this is a serious question. A lot of people think anything they see on social media is true and trustworthy. And I think educating them, saying this is not a vetted, independent, neutral source is one of the solutions to this. Newspapers are edited, they are fact-checked. We need to highlight other sources that are also neutral, fact-checked, edited, and we need to know that people understand the difference between the two.
Okay, thank you. And I'm talking, again, specifically as it relates to Facebook's decision not to allow links to these sources of information on their platform. So maybe think about that. But I'm going to go to Mr. Lowen next, if he can answer the question for me.
Yes, Mr. Broussard. So our group did, our research group has a little paper on this, which I'll send into the committee, on what happened after the Facebook link ban. And the one consequence of this is that people still feel like they're getting their news on Facebook when you ask them about this. So they're not accessing news stories, but they are learning about politics from Facebook. Some news stories do creep through, but they're really learning about it from there. So they're learning about it then logically in a more content-free way. But I'll just say one more thing, Mr. Broussard, which is that the biggest and most important loss in journalism in our country has been the loss of local newspapers. And I think all of you as members who are members of long-standing would know it really mattered what was reported on you in your local paper, because people would read that about what you did in the constituency. Nobody writes about what you do in the Toronto Star back in your constituency. And that loss of local journalism is the thing that in the long term will be devastating to our democracy.
Thank you, Mr. Lowen. Mr. Al-Rawi?
Thank you, MP, for the question. I think if you look at the previous surveys and studies, we see a very clear declining trust in mainstream media. And there are many reasons for that, including the failings of some reporting about events around the world. So, of course, we have social media emerging back about a decade ago, and prompting people to consume more news from there, and they got used to that. And it's a big challenge that we have today following Facebook decision to ban news outlets on this outlet, because people got used to the news from Facebook, but now they are suddenly, exposed to other sources. So that's the main challenge that we have today. But if I may just mention one thing, exposure doesn't mean impact or effect. It doesn't mean that if I am exposed to misinformation, I will be directly impacted by it. It's really important to make that distinction. Otherwise, we are not like sponges, just absorbing everything we get and immediately get influenced by it. So we have different backgrounds, different ideologies, and of course, thoughts. So it's really useful to be more nuanced when we talk about this. And finally, I don't think TikTok is the problem. I think we have major other problems that we face today when it comes to the information ecosystem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Al-Rawi. And Mr. Frank, did you have anything you'd like to add lastly, or did you say what you needed to say?
More or less, but I completely agree with others that the social media being trusted as a viable news source is what is causing the problem.
Thank you, gentlemen. On behalf of the committee and on behalf of Canadians, I want to thank you for your testimony before the committee on this very important study. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to share your expertise and your information with the committee members. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to dismiss the witnesses. We are going to move into some committee business, and there are a few items that I need to discuss, and I apologize. First of all, some of the witnesses that we did have scheduled for today had to cancel. That's the reason why we only had 1 hour of witnesses today. So we've rescheduled their appearance on May. Invitations to reschedule their appearances have been sent for May 21st. We're working on that. And so unless the members have a desire to extend this study on disinformation and misinformation, we can do that. But I know on Thursday we've got our final hour that's set up on Thursday afternoon. We've got a witness list. The notice of the meeting will be sent out after this meeting. So, Ms. Damoff, I saw your hand on just that comment. I have some other things I have to discuss as well. Go ahead.
It is on the comment about extending the study, because I was actually going to suggest that today, Chair. You yourself have mentioned a number of the witnesses that have come forward with information for us and how interesting it is, and we just don't have enough time. I do think we should spend more time on this, and I think it's an important study that we're doing. So, if you need a motion for that, I would do that. However you would like to proceed, but I do think it makes sense to extend it.
So can I just get you to hold off on that thought for a second, because the scheduling of our committee meetings going forward is really tight right now. And let me explain why. Because as I brought up last week, we did receive a letter from the RCMP with respect to SNC Lavalin. The information that was supplied by Mr. Wernick has now been received. So the way it was left off for the committee to determine is whether, in fact, we were going to have an additional meeting based on the information that we received from the RCMP or Mr. Wernick, as well as perhaps asking the Privy Council office for more information if there wasn't satisfaction with the information that was provided by Mr. Wernick. Now, we did decide in the motion that we were going to deal with that within 14 days of receiving that information, and we're within that period right now. So we don't have to think, and we don't have to determine right now, because I realize that the information was just passed on to committee members, but I want you to think about that, where we go with this, if anywhere. So we have to have that discussion at some point within 14 days. The other thing that happens, that's happening as well, is because of the 23rd and the plan to visit the RCMP, we're not going to have a meeting. So that, takes away one meeting for us. So that's some of the challenges that we're having with scheduling. The other thing that we have to deal with as well is the study on the technological use of tools and data. Now, I have been indicated by the analysts that the draft, which you will receive a week from Friday, we are going to have to make time for that. The report as it stands in draft right now is about 50 pages, and there's roughly about 14 recommendations. So that may take some time to deal with. So I have asked the clerk to look at some deviation opportunities for us to have additional meetings. In order for us to conclude our work before the session, we may have to do that, okay? So I just want you to keep that in mind. if we are going to have, because our next study after Thursday starts with the Winnipeg lab, Mr. Villemure's motion that was passed by the committee. So I want you to keep that in mind, Ms. Damoff. We're going to have to find time for more meetings. We can certainly hold off until the fall if we need to, or we can do that now. That's up to the committee. So, Mr. Barrett, go ahead, sir.
So, Chair, I gave notice of a motion that I'd like to move. That's that pursuant to Standing Order 1083H and in light of new media reports, the committee undertake an immediate study into Minister Randy Boissonnault's allegations of fraud and contravention of ethics and lobbying laws, that the committee invite Minister Randy Boissonnault for 3 hours, Kristen Poon, Stephen Anderson of Global Health Initiatives, GHI, and the Ethics Commissioner to testify individually in addition to any other relevant witnesses, and that the committee report its findings to the House. So if I may, Chair.
Okay. You have the floor. You move the motion. Motion's in order. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett. I've got Mr. Fisher right after. Oh.
Point of order?
Go ahead.
I'm only saying this out of procedural fairness. Ms. Damoff moved a motion that you asked to set aside, and then went on a roundabout discussion about the schedule.
Yeah.
And now we're sitting here with a motion that you're considering to be duly put by the Conservative side. I don't have a horse in this game here,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying from the outside looking in, it looks a little bit suspect, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Well, it wasn't suspect.
I'm just saying what it looks like.
I saw Mr. Barrett's hand up.
But you would know for the
Yeah,
record that
well,
Ms.
and
Damoff
we
did
were
propose a motion.
discussing it, and you're quite right. So I thought I'd explain, but I didn't see any indication that Ms. Damoff wanted to go again. But that's, you know what, you're quite right, Mr. Green. So I am going to go back. So I'm going to come back to you right after, Mr. Barrett. But I'm going to go to Ms. Damoff right now. Go ahead.
So I appreciated the context that you gave. I was hoping that committee members might want to have some discussion. If like, as I said to you, I'll put a motion on the floor. So if we want to officially do it that way, I thought it would be more of a casual conversation, but I'll put a motion on the floor that we extend the current misinformation, disinformation meeting by our study by 3 meetings. And I will say, Chair, I appreciate you laying out the what we have before us. But having said that, I think the Canada-China Committee finished a study on the Winnipeg lab, so I don't know that that's a high priority for us to get to before the end of June. And I don't see any reason why, when we've started this study on misinformation, disinformation, we can't add those extra meetings to our schedule before we move on to something else. So I will formally put that motion on the floor, Chair.
Okay, so the motion is to extend by 3 meetings, correct? Okay. Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to go to Ms. Damoff's motion to extend to 3. Go ahead. No, but yeah, Mr. Barrett.
So there's a motion on the floor. Are you receiving additional motions
Well-
while the committee's considering a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Barrett, I did go back to Ms. Damoff on this. I'm going to come back to you.
No, Chair. There's a motion on the floor, and it's been put. You ruled it in order. Notice was given. The motion that you're now going to accept was a notice was not given, and further, I had the floor, and you gave Mr. Green the floor on a point of order, and so so is it your ruling then that my motion is out of order, and I'll await your ruling.
Just hang on a sec, okay, Mr. Barrett? Go ahead. Okay, Sorry, so just after clarifying with the clerk, here's what happened, Mr. Barrett. We were discussing under committee business the misinformation, disinformation study. You had moved your motion, and I agreed with that. We had gone to, Mr. Green had raised a point of order, and I had accepted his point of order because we were still discussing this, what Ms. Damoff had brought up. So unfortunately, the decision that I made dealt with Mr. Green's valid point of order, and so the motion that we're going to be dealing with right now, and I will come back to you on this other one, will be Ms. Damoff's motion on extending the meeting study. So that's unfortunately that's what occurred, Mr. Barrett.
What is she didn't move a motion.
We were still in discussion on she effectively still had the floor on what Mr. Green had brought up. So,
but she actually did not have the chair, or she did not have the floor.
Just challenge and do the vote. You can go back to your website.
Yeah, I'm going to, I made the decision, Mr. Barrett. So I'm going to have to, if you don't agree with that, I'm going to have to ask that you challenge it because the decision was made, unfortunately, for you.
Brutal.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Damoff, go ahead, please.
Well, Chair, it's unfortunate that Mr. Barrett is so opposed to even having a discussion about continuing this study.
Chair.
Hang on, Ms. Damoff. Point of order. I think what Mr. Barrett was talking about was the procedural aspect of what had occurred. I've explained that already, but
correct.
Go ahead.
But if we're just accepting interventions when other people have the floor, let me make one. And it's not the substance of what Ms. Damoff is offering, Chair.
It's not a point of order.
But we're doing that now.
No, we're not. Mine was a legitimate point of order, bro.
So, Chair, I will have to challenge your ruling because this is there's no standing order that you're using to dismiss the motion that was duly moved and ruled in order. And so it's not an acceptable precedent to set that once a member is given the floor, there were no other speakers ahead of me, I was given the floor, I moved a motion that notice had been given of, and because someone might maybe move a motion sometime in the future, well, you can't move your motion, it's dismissed, we're going to deal with someone else. So yeah, I challenge your ruling.
So I'm going to accept the challenge, Mr. Barrett. So we're going to have to call a vote on my decision. So I'm going to call the vote. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Sorry, just before we go to the vote, could the clerk explain exactly what the motion is? Because I know when it's challenging the chair, the voting yes and no can, like, what exactly is the wording that we're voting on?
So the point that we're voting on is that Mr. Barrett is challenging my decision as chair on the ruling that I made that on Mr. Green's point of order that allowed the discussion to continue so that you could move your motion, Ms. Damoff. So that's what we're dealing. So if you don't agree with my ruling, you vote no. Yeah. And then if you agree with my ruling, you vote yes. So, okay.
Thank you. So it's as Mr. Chair explained, it's a vote on the ruling by the chair. The question is, shall the decision of the chair sustain? Mr. Baines?
Yes.
Ms. Damoff?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Housewater?
Yes.
Ms. Khalid?
Yes.
Mr. Barrett?
No.
Mr. Brock?
No.
Mr. Kirk?
No.
Monsieur Villemur?
Oui.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Nays 3, yeas 7.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk. So the decision of the chair has been sustained. We are now on the motion that Ms. Damoff has moved. Monsieur Villemur, go ahead, please.
Bien que
I agree that we're talking about a very important subject, and it's even more significant than we originally thought. However, I have two things I'd like to raise. We're having a hard time having our witnesses come to see us, and for the Winnipeg Lab, I can say that the motion adopted here does not have the same goal as the one adopted in Canada, China. We'll be able to talk about it, but it's not because of the Canada-China motion that we have to do more. It's because we have something to look at. And I'm concerned about the availability of witnesses. Thank you.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Villemure. Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Villemure. Mr. Barrett.
I move to adjourn debate.
We have a motion to adjourn debate. It's non-debatable. Go ahead, Madam. Do we have consensus to adjourn debate? No. Go ahead, Madam Clerk. Take the roll.
So, a vote on adjourning the debate on the motion moved by Ms. Damoff. Mr. Baines.
No.
Ms. Damoff.
No.
Mr. Fisher.
No.
Mr. Hauswater.
No.
Ms. Kelly.
No.
Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Mr. Brock.
Yes.
Mr. Kirk.
Yes.
Monsieur Villemure.
No.
Mr. Green.
No.
Yeas 3, nays 7, oui 3, non
Okay,
7.
so the motion to adjourn debate has been defeated. I have Mr. Green and then suivi par Monsieur Villemure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And as I with good intentions, mangled the analogy about not having a horse in the race, I think that as a committee, we have to get to the completion of some of our studies. I'm very aware of the timelines to the end of the session. I am not interested in going down every rabbit hole that comes before this committee. I'm also not of the mind that there's such an urgency on this particular study that it must be completed in sequence right now. So I say that to say that I do think this is a study that requires greater depth, longer analysis. I'll share with you, and it's not to the detriment or to the character of the witnesses that were present, but we do need to get to a place where subject matter experts are willing to provide us recommendations. So we need to start to find the type of people who will take political positions on providing recommendations, whether it's using global comparators, academic research, whether it's using subject matter expertise from the industry. Because I think that as a committee, this, in light of an election, we need to get this right. So I'm even willing, and I share this with my conservative counterparts so they understand where I'm coming from here, I would agree this needs to be extended. I don't necessarily agree it has to be next week. I don't agree that it has to take the order of precedence. But I think we do have to get to better results, better recommendations, better clarity around that. And I say that, Mr. Chair, I'm not a huge fan of like every week there being a new thing and a new headline we're chasing, where we're doing 3 or 4 committees, the same thing. And I say this like only partially in jest. The same people at the same committees saying the same thing is not a great use of our time, taxpayer resources, our mandate within the course of this actual committee. So, with that being said, vote by vote on all the issues that are brought before this committee, I will determine my vote based on that. Knowing that regardless of whatever decision I make, some folks are going to say I'm complicit here or I'm there, or I'm going to end up on somebody's fundraiser. I don't care. I just know what we're trying to do in this committee, trying to do the right thing for the good and welfare of people. So I say that to say, like, yes, I support an extended version. I would also say if that happened in September, I would be okay with that. If that meant we actually went out and got the world's best subject matter experts on this issue who could come in, educate us, inform the general public, provide strong recommendations, that we can come back with a fulsome report, That's where I would go to. I'm not doing this so that we're bumping off other things that could be dealt with at this committee between now and the summer. So that's the context for which I'll be making all my decisions on a move forward basis, vote by vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. And just to remind you, there have been some motions that have been adopted by this committee that needs to be dealt with. So, Monsieur Villemure.
Je suis dans la même lignée.
I agree with my honorable colleague. I believe that we do have to move forward, but I don't think there's an urgency. Given the availability of witnesses, we could perhaps say, well, we'll go for 3 hours instead of 2 and try to place them so that we can hear from the experts. I don't think it can be unlimited, but we need to work on the quality of witnesses. Last week, when we heard from Mr. Finkenstein, it was so interesting. And we understood the depth of this issue, and we need to hear from more similar witnesses. I proposed this study, and I knew the situation was serious, but I didn't realize just how serious. So we can't have 10, 12 projects ongoing at the same time, but I do believe that we need a deadline to receive quality witnesses, and if we look at all of these things, I think we can do good work in the public's interest. Thank you, Monsieur Villemure.
Et nous avons...
We have an issue that needs to be solved, and that should be amending the list that we have. We have fewer witnesses than what we need for the current study. So that's an issue. We need to have a wider list.
And then Mr. Green.
Thank you. And I have no problem with what Mr. Green is proposing and Mr. Villemure, that it doesn't necessarily have to be consecutive. And I might even suggest that our analysts in their spare time, which I know they have none of, might be able to do some digging to see if there are some witnesses. I know we submitted quite a few. I don't remember exactly how many, but I have no issue whatsoever with it, even if it goes into the fall, if that's what's required. So I think in fairness, what we're saying is that this is a study that has actually sparked more interest than we initially determined. And so giving it the proper time and attention and with so much focus on what's going on in society and in particular what's going on to us as politicians and the impact that it's having on our lives and on our work as politicians, I do think it merits a proper study.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Damoff. Mr. Green, go ahead.
Thank you. You'll note that in my recent interventions, I always go right to the point, which is, what are your recommendations? I'm wondering if in your communication and invitation to this committee, we could preempt that and ask them to come with opening remarks and any recommendations in advance. It would be so much more helpful for me, and I'm sure others, I'm seeing nodding of heads, if we had a witness testimony that included their recommendations that we can then engage in, question, challenge, support, explore. I think it would be better for the analysts. So I'm just wondering through you, Mr. Chair, if you can answer that. Is there a mechanism for which in your invitations you could request that for them?
Just looking over at the clerk now and discussing it, there's no question that that's the kind of thing that we can do, Mr. Green, in the invitation. Advise the guests that the committee will be looking for solutions to the challenges that exist right now. So we can certainly do that.
I think we should do that for all committees, by the way. Like all studies moving forward.
Okay. Okay, good. All right, I don't see any further discussion, so we are on Ms. Damoff's motion to extend, and I've heard the committee about timelines, understanding. I think, Madam Clerk, what did we discuss this morning? We have upwards of 7 or 8 meetings that are left on the schedule to deal with everything. And as I've mentioned to committee, that I have asked for divergence to find available slots, just so that we can complete our work before the summer session. So before the summer break. On Ms. Damos' motion, do I have consensus to expand it by 3? And then we'll figure out the scheduling on that. And the only thing I'm going to ask is for more witnesses from committee members as well. Do we have consensus on that? We do? Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so that's noted. Mr. Barrett?
Are you sure?
I am sure, sir. Go ahead.
Perfect. So, I gave proper notice of motion, Chair, and I'd like to move a motion now. The motion is that pursuant to Standing Order 108-3H, and in light of new media reports, the committee undertake an immediate study into Minister Randy Boissonnault's allegation of fraud and contravention of ethics and lobbying laws, that the committee invite Minister Randy Boissonnault for 3 hours, Kristen Poon, Stephen Anderson of Global Health Imports, and the Ethics Commissioner to testify individually in addition to any other relevant witnesses, and that the committee report its findings to the House. Chair, this motion is incredibly important. We heard from the minister yesterday when he testified at the Standing Committee on Human Resources that he first said he wasn't paid. Then he said that he wasn't paid. And then he said that he was paid. So we know that the minister is having a real tough time keeping his story straight. This speaks to, of course, questions of the Lobbying Act. It speaks to the Conflict of Interest Act. It speaks to the Conflict of Interest Code for members. And when we're talking about a minister of the Crown, it's incredibly important that Canadians know that they've arranged their private affairs in such a way that they're not furthering their own private interests. And we see that in Minister Boissonnault's case, there's a whole lot of question marks on if he did that. Registering one name with the Ethics Commissioner, but it's not the trading name of the company, looks like there's some subterfuge happening here. Looks like he's trying to hide what he's doing. But to have a company that is paying a minister while they're in cabinet, and that company is simultaneously lobbying that minister's own department and lobbying the government, and that while his company's efforts did get more than $100 million for his client, in one case, a $10 million project, the minister even announced it while he's collecting checks from the company that did the lobbying work. In another case, with Global Health Imports, his other business interests, we of course have the questions raised in Global News about the fact that the minister was listed as a director. Well, this company is getting contracts with municipal and provincial governments. And big players in that space are wondering how it is that this two-man shop that's reselling personal protective equipment is able to land contracts that they're not able to. While having a federal cabinet minister listed as a director for your company seems to get results. And that company, of course, there's now been allegations of fraud and wire fraud made against the minister's partner there. So these are incredibly troubling allegations that have come forward, and it behooves us, based on the mandate of this committee, to of course address that. This witness list could be addressed over a couple of short meetings, and of course would give us the opportunity to provide transparency to Canadians, where that of course seems to have failed, both in the minister's most recent appearance at committee, but also in his disclosures to officers of Parliament.
Mr. Barrett, Mr. Fisher, go ahead on the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And yes, on the motion, it's been about a week now that Mr. Barrett has been fishing. And yesterday, the Conservatives disrupted the HUMA committee while they were doing main estimates, arguably to get their glorious social media clips and attack the reputation of the minister. But they got the facts wrong about this news story. They were corrected numerous times during the meeting yesterday. First, they claimed that he was in violation of Section 4 of the Conflict of Interest Act. As the minister pointed out in the Global News story itself, the Ethics Commissioner's office confirmed that he met all of the requirements of the code. They claimed that the minister inappropriately awarded funds to a company. But as he pointed out, these grants went to the Edmonton Airport. These grants were awarded by departments that didn't report to the minister, Transportation and Prairies Canada. They incorrectly stated that the company, Navis Group, received millions in contracts when in fact those funds went to the Edmonton International Airport, by the way, the 5th largest airport in the country. Mr. Barrett incorrectly stated that the minister was the owner of a company when that wasn't the case. And that was pointed out to him. He scrambled and incorrectly said that the minister had an interest in that company. Again, Mr. Chair, I believe this is a fishing expedition by the opposition and by Mr. Barrett specifically. I can only assume that they've read the articles and they know that the conflict of interest and ethics commissioners cleared the minister in this. I find it a little bit ironic and kind of appropriate that during the study of misinformation and disinformation, we're having a conversation about things that are clearly misinformation and disinformation. Again, all for the glorious social media clip.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fisher. Monsieur Villemure, sur la motion.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We often hear from the Ethics Commissioner, and we trust him. The motion as moved counters the work of the Ethics Commissioner that has not been completed. I have an amendment that would read as follows. That pursuant to Standing Order 1083H and in the light of new media reports, the committee undertake and the rest, and we remove the rest and we say the committee invite the Minister Randy Boissonnault for 1 hour and the Ethics Commissioner Conrad von Finkenstein for an hour as well. I believe that that meeting could answer Mr. Barrett's questions, would not slow our work here at the committee, and the Commissioner will be able to tell us if he is conducting an investigation. I don't want to undermine, I wouldn't want our committee to undermine the authority of the Commissioner, but we could receive answers to the question that has been asked.
Just pour,
On the amendment, just to clarify, we would invite the Minister and the Ethics Commissioner for 1 hour each. Yes, 1 hour each. The amendment is in order. Do you want to speak to your amendment? You've talked about it. I can summarize. I don't want us to undermine the Commissioner's work, and we need to look at this. But we need to take it out of this exaggeration. We need to shed a light on things, of course, but I don't believe it's the end of the world. So, one meeting, 1 hour with the Commissioner, 1 hour with Mr. Boissonnault.
On the amendment, sir.
Thank you. I've had the opportunity to interact with the Commissioner enough to know probably what his answers are going to be. I don't think we're going to get much, given that if there's an ongoing investigation. So what I would propose, and not to muddy this, is I would like to see the spirit of the original motion reflected with the witness list. And what I would like to open up for discussion prior to moving a sub-amendment, I do believe that having Kristen Poon and Stephen Anderson present would be helpful. So, Mr. Chair, if I could just ask you this question, what is the likelihood of us having the resources for a 3-hour meeting? Because I don't think they should be with the Commissioner. I think the Commissioner should be standalone for a lot of reasons. But I do think they should be included, and I don't want them excluded, because having a professional politician and minister, Mr. Boissonnault, here for an hour, and then having a professional bureaucrat and commissioner, Mr. von Finkelstein, for an hour, I'm not sure we're going to get much light. So I'm wondering, what are the resources and the possibility of us having a 3rd hour added to that? Because I would prefer, I'll just say this now, given the choice between the commissioner and the new witnesses, I would take the new witnesses if we only had 2 hours. If we had 3, sure, we can invite the commissioner. But I can already assure you what he's going to say.
So, Mr. Green, as I mentioned at the offset, I have asked for some deviation requests. We could, preferably in the afternoons is when that could happen, but that would be up, if that's the direction, then I can ask the clerk to possibly extend by another hour what is the normal 2-hour session. We can do that. I see the clerk is trying to get my attention, so just hang on a sec here.
For resolution. No.
Go ahead, Mr. Green.
I would propose a sub-amendment that eliminates the commissioner and puts the witnesses on. And I would say that would leave us space, should we have additional questions for the commissioner, that we can invite the commissioner at a later date. I'm not, we've had him here numerous times on various topics, and he is very consistent with his answers. And so I would propose that a sub-amendment I'd put on the floor that we defer the commissioner, and in the first opportunity, have the minister and the 2 witnesses. Now, what I would say to committee and open it up for discussion, some people might think it's better to have the minister first and the other people second. I actually think it would be better to have the other witnesses first and the minister second. But I'll leave that up to the committee, but that would be my sub-amendment, to defer the commissioner and to include the witnesses as listed in the original motion.
Okay, so I just want to, the problem with the sub-amendment is that it's kind of counter to what Mr. Villemure's amendment was. We can, just so that we're all clear on this, what you're saying is to eliminate the commissioner, but have the other witnesses as proposed by Mr. Barrett, and then as a matter of organization for the clerk and I to have the minister appear after the witnesses that have been proposed by Mr. Barrett. Correct? Okay. So as long as we're all clear on what Mr. Green is proposing, yeah, I've got some hands, so I just want to clarify that with Mr. Green. I think I had Ms. Damoff first, Mr. Housefather, and then Ms. Khalid. So, and then Mr. Villemure. Mr. Villemure was actually before Ms. Khalid. So, go ahead, Ms. Damoff.
Thank you, Chair. I worry on this committee that we do the work of what the Ethics Commissioner is supposed to do, and I know. I understand what Mr. Green is saying about we know what the Ethics Commissioner is going to say, because they don't answer questions about an investigation that's going on. But they can provide context on the act itself. So, but I still worry that there's an assumption from Mr. Barrett of guilt here when the report, even in the news media, said that the minister met the requirements of the code. So it concerns me when we're superseding anything that the Ethics Commissioner does and saying, well, we know better than the Ethics Commissioner does, so we need to do our own investigation. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do meetings on this, but I don't think it's helpful to get these additional witnesses here. And I am also concerned about the presumption of guilt here without the Ethics Commissioner being able to do an investigation. I mean, an option would be for this committee to refer it to the Ethics Commissioner and ask them to do it. So I'll leave it there, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Housefather on the sub-amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't like to get into procedural stuff, but this is just procedurally, this sub-amendment, I think Mr. Villemure would have to withdraw his amendment and let Mr. Green put an amendment, because the sub-amendment counters the purpose of the amendment, and it's certainly not receivable in that way. So I don't want to over-logisticize, but I think you have to do it the other way.
I recognized that point earlier, Mr. Housefather, so I'm going to continue with the discussion on the basis of what I had stated earlier, okay? So, Monsieur Villemure, go ahead, please.
C'est bon.
Okay, Ms. Khalid?
Thanks, Chair. I'm actually a little wanting to seek a little bit of clarity. I don't have the text of the sub-amendment in front of me, and I'm wondering if we can.
Yeah, the text of the sub-amendment is to have the minister appear, have the witnesses that Mr. Barrett had proposed for one meeting, 1 hour for the minister, 1 hour for the witnesses.
Are we still talking about the witnesses that are listed here, these two witnesses, along with the minister and then the ethics commissioner?
The ethics commissioner has been removed by Mr. Green.
Okay, so that's what.
Okay.
Do you agree with that, Rene?
Well,
we're on the sub amendment,
gonna
so
say
we can deal with that, and then Mr. Villemure we can deal with Mr. Villemure afterwards. So that's where we're at on the sub amendment.
Thank you for clarifying that, Chair. I appreciate
Okay,
it.
thank you, Mr. Green.
Yeah, I would just say that from my experience with the commissioner, and I'm sure you can refer to the Hansard, I was trying to find it, he makes it very clear that it is not his job to propose any legislative remedies, that he only operates within existing legislation. I would put to you 3/4 of the work that we do here is because of the gray areas, and I think it's our committee's opportunity in this, not to ambulance chase Mr. Boissonnault. On the face value of it, I accept what's been reported. I don't think, though, because it's legislatively compliant, that it's ethical. And I think that is the mandate of this committee, is to study and examine where we can make progress on our legislation, to close loopholes, to have greater clarity, to ensure that there isn't this continued cynicism and erosion in our institutions in this very nefarious world of lobbyists, corporate power, procurement. So that's my intention out of this. My intention is that we have testimony that provides us, hopefully, with some insight that allows us to have recommendations back to say, here's what the legislation says, this is what happened as a case study, here's what we propose to eliminate the future opportunity for this. So I'm not presuming any guilt because I take at face value what has been reported, but I still don't think it was right. And those are two very different things. Thank you.
Ms. Damoff?
I'm a little bit confused procedurally here, Chair, but if required, I would move an amendment, sub-amendment, that the Ethics Commissioner be added back in, because I do think we need to hear from the Ethics Commissioner.
Yeah, and procedurally, we cannot move anything further. We have a sub-amendment, we cannot move another sub-amendment. So I hope it's clear among the committee of what Mr. Green has proposed in his sub-amendment, and that is to remove the Ethics Commissioner and allow, or defer, and allow for the other members to, or the other witnesses, including the minister, to appear. So I've got Mr. Fisher. Go ahead, Mr. Fisher.
Yeah, I don't think I would support Mr. Green's sub-amendment, but I would support where Rene was going with this. And
okay, so here's what I'm going to suggest then. I'm going to suggest that we vote on Mr. Hang on a second. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to vote on Monsieur Villemure's amendment, and then if Mr. Green wants to reintroduce an amendment after that, then we can do that. But I want to clarify, I want to clear up the confusion here. So I'm going to call the vote on Monsieur Villemure's amendment.
That's exactly what I was trying to seek clarity on. I'm not sure if are you able to just disregard a sub-amendment and then just go to the amendment? I mean, technically, what Mr. Green has done is that he has sub-amended Mr. Villemur's amendment.
So the clean thing to do right now is to, not deal with the sub-amendment, but to deal with Mr. Villemur's amendment. Well, I mean, I'll go to you next, Mr. Green, but you can withdraw your sub-amendment.
Withdraw.
Okay, so now we're dealing with Mr. Villemur's amendment. So I'm going to call the vote on.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, apologies, Mr. Chair. Can we get Mr. Villemur's amended, Mr. Barrett's motion amended by Mr. Villemur read into the record so we know exactly what we're voting on? Thank you.
I can ask the clerk to do that. Mr. Fisher, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
So, give me a second. Sorry about that. With the new setup, I'm really close. All right. So the amendment from Mr. Villemur would be okay. This is different than the other version I got. Okay. The amendment from Mr. Villemur would be to keep the beginning that says pursuant to Standing Order 103.8 and in light of new media reports, blah, blah. Then he would delete everything that is after, and he would replace it with that in the first place, the committee invite the Minister Randy Boissonneau for 1 hour meeting, and after the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner Conrad Win von Fickenstein for 1 hour also.
Okay, so that was Mr. Villemur's amendment. Go ahead, Ms. Khalid.
Thanks, Chair. Just a little bit confused because I think what Mr. Villemur had said is a little bit different than what I just heard. I'm trying to make notes here. So what is being proposed here is that it'll be 2 meetings or it'll be 1 meeting where the first hour?
1 meeting, 1 hour each witness.
Okay, and it's not the 2 witnesses together
Nope,
at
separate.
the same table? And does that also then remove the civilians, I guess?
So this was Mr. Villemur's amendment to not have those other witnesses, but Mr. Green had talked about in his sub-amendment to not have the commissioner, but also have those witnesses and the minister appear. So on Mr. Villemur's amendment, it's the minister and the commissioner, period.
So I'll add some of my thoughts on this, Chair, if that's okay. I do find it a little bit strange that, I'm not sure if there is a review going on or an investigation by the Ethics Commissioner right now on this specific issue. And I know that the Minister has appeared in other committees to talk about this exact same issue. So I'm really not understanding what the objective here is in this committee. I mean, if we're trying to explore, as Mr. Green had said, where are the gray areas within the Lobbying Act, the Conflict of Interest Code, et cetera, then how do these 2 witnesses help us in identifying that at all, right? So, and Mr. Green has also indicated that the Ethics Commissioner, we all know that he may not be as forthcoming in a direct kind of scenario in terms of the questions that would be posed to him. So I am questioning kind of, and also, Chair, we've had this conversation many times, a lot of things on the docket, a lot of things on the go. The importance and triaging effectively would be helpful for the work that we're doing. And I would like to see us come up with some report, some positive impact on how we lobby or are lobbied and how we conduct ourselves as parliamentarians under the code. So I'm really not sure how this furthers the objectives of the committee in and of itself. So I will leave that there, Chair.
Okay. Ms. Damoff, did you have your hand up, or was it Mr. Fisher?
Well, I did quickly just to ask, I've got a meeting waiting in my office. What time do we have resources till?
we're getting close.
Okay.
Getting close to the end of resources, but I'll see how this goes before I make that determination. Go ahead, Mr. Fisher.
Point of order, Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
There's a few of us on the Conservative team that have very significant commitments at this hour, and I'm wondering what that means in terms of we're running out of time.
So the option is to move to adjourn, or I can move it in. I can move it probably in the next 5 minutes or so. So we've got about 5 minutes left with resources. So just to be clear, I'm going to go. I'm going to go to Mr. Fisher. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I was kind of looking across the room at Mr. Villemure, like, that's not exactly what I got when our clerk read that off as to what you said. Can you just chime in as to whether what you heard the clerk read back was indeed what your amendment was? Because with our back and forth there, you kind of looked like it wasn't, but you might be okay with that. But I'm seeking some clarity, if that's fair, through you, Chair, because I don't think that's exactly what he said.
Merci, M. Fisher. Pour résumer en quelques mots.
To summarize in a few words, the amendment seeks to hear from Mr. Boissonneau for 1 hour, the Commissioner for 1 hour, instead of the other witnesses mentioned in the initial motion.
And I think I was clear on
Yep.
what Mr. Villemure was proposing. So okay, so we're on the amendment. I don't see any further discussion. Do we have consensus on the amendment? No. Okay. Recorded vote, please, on the amendment, Madam Clerk.
Vote is on the amendment by Mr. Villemure. Mr. Baines. Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Damoff.
Yes.
Mr. Fisher.
Yes to the amendment.
Mr. Housewater.
Yes.
Ms. Khalid.
Yes.
Mr. Barrett.
No.
Mr. Brock.
No.
Mr. Kirk.
No.
Mr. Villemure.
Oui.
Mr. Green.
No.
Yeas 6, nays 4, oui 6, non 4.
Okay, so the amendment carries. We're on the main motion as amended. Ms. Khalid.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you. So I really do appreciate that, with the Minister and the Ethics Commissioner kind of coming in one meeting, I'm wondering, and I'm sure that I'll have conversations with my colleagues about this as well, kind of what the objective is here. Are we going for kind of a gotcha moment? Are we going for looking for objectives into, or just specific areas of the Lobbying Act or of the Conflict of Interest Code to see where those gaps are? Or are we trying to figure out, has there been violations? So I'm sure the movers of the motion can help understand, and if Mr. Villemure, through you, Chair, can help us understand that a little bit too, I'd really appreciate it.
Mr. Villemure.
Avec plaisir, Monsieur le Président.
Of course, I can respond to my colleague. I've never sought a gotcha moment. I want us to focus on public interest. There's a question here, and I'm not presuming any guilt. There's a question, and the people at the heart of the question are Monsieur Boissonneau and the Ethics Commissioner. Even though if there's an investigation ongoing, he won't be able to tell us much. We don't want a gotcha moment, and so we need to reduce our list of witnesses to really what's essential, so that we're not presuming any guilt. That's why I propose this amendment. Thank you, Monsieur Villemure.
Thank you, Chair. I did watch part of Minister Boissonneau's testimony yesterday, so I know he's going to come here and provide us with the facts in the case, which I think is sorely lacking in what the social media clips have been generated. But I do, I just want to reiterate, I do think the Ethics Commissioner should be able to do their work on this if that's the case. And I'm concerned that we're constantly going down these rabbit holes of gotcha moments to try and get derail studies like the one that we've been doing on misinformation and disinformation. So I appreciate, I know my colleague from the block is an honorable person, and I appreciate where he's going with this. But I do have concerns that we're constantly going down the lobby. And I have the utmost respect for my NDP colleague. But rather than doing it with different news stories, why don't we just do a study on the act itself instead of trying to tie it to individual situations? If that's, and I believe his concern is genuine about the gray areas in the act, then that's what we should be looking at, not individual cases.
I don't see any further discussion on this. So do we have
Sorry, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on something that Ms. Damov said about creating a study on this topic. And I think that would be a really good idea if we are able to kind of take it back with us and
so
see if we can.
I would invite you to put a notice on motion then. If you do want to do a study on this, you can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any other discussion on this. So do we have consensus on the motion as amended? We do? No. Oh, okay. Then we'll call for a vote. Go ahead, Madam Clerk. Okay. Est-ce que tu peux lire la motion?
Can you read the motion, please, Madam Clerk?
Second.
Okay. Just wait a sec. We'll get it read into the record, so you know.
Donc, la motion se lirait en...
The motion would read that pursuant to Standing Order 108.3H, and in light of new media reports, the committee undertake a study and invite Minister Randy Boissonnault for an hour, and then the Ethics Commissioner Conrad von Finkenstein for an hour as well.
Good.
So
Call the vote.
The vote is on the motion as amended. Mr. Baines.
No.
Ms. Damov.
No.
Mr. Fisher.
No.
Mr. Housewater.
No.
Ms. Kelly.
No.
Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Mr. Brock.
Yes.
Mr. Kirk.
Yes.
Monsieur Villemur.
Oui.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Yeas 595. Oui 5, non 5.
Okay. And I vote yes.
Yeas 6, nays 5.
Motion as amended carries. I have Miss Khalid. She had her hand up. I'm giving her a quick second. Go ahead, Miss Khalid. I'm going to have to adjourn the meeting. So
I got you. Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Chair. And thank you for giving me the floor really quickly. I'll just put a notice on motion that given the comments of the Leader of the Opposition last week, in which he suggested that he would use the notwithstanding clause if given the chance, and previous statements that the Conservative Party of Canada would require a digital ID to access content on the internet, that the committee report to the House that the committee A, recognizes the importance of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms to protect the rights of all Canadians, including the right to privacy, and B, opposes the federal parliament's use of the notwithstanding clause in all instances.
The motion is on notice. Appreciate that. Mr. Brock, you had your hand up. Motion to adjourn. Okay, motion to adjourn. All those in favor? We have consensus? Okay, thank you. Meeting's adjourned.